So thank you, Anne, for asking me to speak today. I'm a neurologist. Neurology entails the whole head to toe spectrum of the nervous system. So the big part of what I do is take care of people with nerve and muscle problems, but also over the years have felt a calling to seminary and theological and faith training. So over the last couple of years, as I've entered that training, have learned that there's a whole lot of reading and writing and reflection on ways that individuals experiencing cognitive difficulties can remain very connected to God and to their faith and really maintain a strong sense of purpose and calling. And that this also applies for caregivers for whom there can be a lot of stress. So I'm going to start off by talking briefly about what dementia is, what Alzheimer's disease is, and then talk about how our society views aging and loss of ability in a way that's very different than God and the Bible call us to approach those. And we'll talk about, pardon me, some ways that those with dementia can remain engaged and vital and active in life, and ways that we as family, friends, and community members can support them in that journey. And then we'll talk about how caregivers can get support, because this can be very difficult for those caring for individuals with cognitive problems. I'll touch briefly about physical disability. That's not an area that's a main focus of the talk, but there is a message for those of you and loved ones experiencing physical disability also. And I acknowledge that all of you are at different places in your journeys, and everyone has very unique abilities and struggles. Everything we discuss will not apply to all of you, but I hope that I'm able to provide some hope and practical suggestions that will be helpful for each of you, regardless of where you are in life. We'll start off with some definitions. Alzheimer's is very common. It affects 3% of those between their mid-60s and their mid-70s. Just under 20% of those between their mid-70s and mid-80s, and just under a third of those over 85. Dementia is a broader category. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. And dementia is a broad group of disorders in which individuals have difficulties with two or more cognitive tasks in a way that's more expected for age, and it impacts their ability to do their daily activities. And we're talking more basic daily activities, not being able to do calculus. Most people, once they stop using calculus in school and work, can't do calculus anymore. So we're talking more basic activities. And there are a good many medical conditions that can cause these same things to happen. So if someone is found to have a metabolic or nutritional disorder that's treatable, treating a workup for that can help rule that out. It is really necessary before we say that someone has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. And at all stages, I want to touch briefly on what we can do to help reduce the chances of getting dementia. And as individuals start to develop cognitive problems, things they can do to optimize their function. And managing and optimizing medical conditions always makes a difference. Sleep apnea is a very common and condition that a lot of people don't realize can make a big difference and can contribute to worsening of cognition in individuals who already have dementia, and can increase the risk not only of dementia, but of high blood pressure and stroke in younger individuals. So getting checked for, getting a thorough workup for sleep apnea and medical conditions, especially thyroid conditions, and low vitamin levels, especially vitamin B12, can manage a lot of cognitive difficulties. Review medications. There are lots of very commonly used medications, some that you would expect and know are likely to dull our cognition, like sleeping pills and pain medications. But there are some more commonly used medications, a good many antihistamines or allergy medications, and even some newer medications for heartburn. We're finding in the long run may affect cognition. So always check frequently with your healthcare providers at making sure that you're on medications that are appropriate for your overall health and for whatever stage in life you are. The same things that are good for our hearts are good for our brains. So make sure blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar are always in good control. Physical activity is wonderfully helpful. Recommendation is 150 minutes per week of moderate physical activity. So that's activity where you're working just hard enough where it's a little hard to talk in regular conversation. Health hour 5 days a week isn't that much. So getting out and getting active can help prevent future problems and can help optimize function for those who already have problems. Staying active and connected with friends and family has huge value. And learning and doing new things. Reading and learning is excellent, but there's added benefit when we are actually using the information that we're gaining. So a new language, a new hobby, a new sport, a new set of tasks at work has extra added benefit. And in terms of just day in and day out for all of us, to help us prevent those moments where we just can't quite remember things we think we should, notes and reminders are actually very helpful. So iPhones can be really helpful for that. Post-its are helpful. And multitasking. Our society has made us think that we should be super efficient in trying to do more than one thing at once, which is a bad idea for our brains because we can't do either task well when we're trying to do two tasks at once. And I want to go into a little bit of background into what modern psychiatrists, psychologists, and sociologists take going back a few centuries, but especially how in modern days we view our brains and our abilities. A lot of people for the last 300 to 400 years have used the phrase cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. It was coined by a well-intentioned French philosopher, René Descartes in the 1700s, who was exploring things like what does it mean to be made in the image of God, and realized that he proposed the notion that as humans, we have the ability to reason and think more than other animals. So really started to propose the notion that that's what sets us apart as in the image of God. That over the years has become sort of the predominant thought in Western society. The Bible tells us something very different. And I had a little laugh when I was putting these slides together. The slide deck in PowerPoint had a picture of a Labrador Retriever. This week our Labrador Retriever realized if we leave the pantry open, if he gets his nose in just the right spot, he can turn over the bread basket, rip open a loaf of bread, and have a snack when we're not watching it closely. So we're not the only creatures that God has made that have the ability to think and reason. And to think about what makes us made in God's image, let's go way back to the beginning, to Genesis 1 and the creation of the world and the creation of man. And in Genesis, through the first 6 days, at the end of each day, after God making the heavens, God making earth, God making animals, at the end of each of those days, the author says that it was good. And I like the Common English Bible translation at the end of the 6th day when God creates man. The author tells us that it was supremely good, and that in the image of God, we are all beloved children of God, all equally loved and fully valued for who we are. And John Swinton, who is a psychiatry nurse who has taken on a second career as a theologian and has written probably more extensively about the role of faith in dementia than anyone else has, takes a spin on I think, therefore I am. and says that despite the fallenness of our condition, everything we have and everything we know exists because of God and is deeply loved by God. And the ancient Israelites believed strongly in the notion of nephesh. It actually is a Hebrew word that's used extensively in that first chapter of Genesis. And most people think of us as a body and a mind that are put together and that they don't have much to do with each other. The ancient Israelites actually viewed us as not a body and a mind, but as dirt together with the breath of God. And that's what a nephesh is. It's that combination. And that's how Adam was created. And we are all made in that same way and retain that same breath of life throughout our lives, regardless of what tasks we are and are not able to perform. A few more viewpoints on this. St. Augustine, whose mother, St. Monica, is the namesake of our fair city, called us terra animate, or in Latin, we are animated earth. In fact, there's a play on words in that Adam and humus, or earth, come from the same ancient root. And theologian Walter Brueggemann from the last century summarizes our relationship with God as the most human aspect of life, in saying that the human person has vitality as a living, empowered agent and creature only in relation to God, who faithfully gives breath. This relationship or status is based not on abilities of any kind. It's based solely on our being a human made in God's image. So I want to transition to talking about ways that individuals with cognitive problems can still have purpose, can still be engaged and active in life. Regular contact with familiar groups is vital, so staying active and connected with family, friends, day programs. At the end, we'll talk about some local programs that are good resources, and religious and social groups. And for those of us who, and those of you who are involved in organizing activities for communities, look for ways that individuals with early dementia are able to participate in those activities. Individuals with early dementia make wonderful greeters. They make wonderful servers of snacks at potlucks and coffee hour. And a good many churches and communities are being very intentional about combining activities with children in their Sunday schools and preschools with senior groups. It's really wonderful to see these two groups who are able to look in ways that those of us in the in-between times of life aren't as open with our eyes to just the pure love and beauty and joy of one another's presence. And so I encourage any of you that have those opportunities to try to get those groups together. And we all know and understand that as dementia progresses, things like that are hard. And there's a fair amount of thinking and writing about ways to help people still feel comfort and peace and purpose, even as their ability to understand and comprehend what's going on in their lives becomes harder. In dementia, more distant memories are oftentimes retained and ability and easier to recall than more recent memories. So really engaging family members and friends with remote memories can be a source of peace and joy for them and help engage them in the world around them, even if it's things that happened many years ago. And they can share present moments of joy, even though they may not remember them. So helping share things that have brought someone joy throughout their life as they develop in their dementia can have huge benefit. Their favorite foods, their favorite TV shows, their favorite movies, their favorite music. Oliver Sacks, who was a prolific author in the lay press about scientific, especially psychological subjects, coined the phrase rementing. And that he found that when his patients went to chapel, even if they were very agitated from dementia or other problems, they just got a certain peace with them after being in chapel and experiencing familiar songs and sounds and prayers that lasted well past that time of being in chapel. John Swinton, who is the theologian who's written about dementia, speaks extensively about this, but says as much as he loves hymns, please have Beatles and Rolling Stones available to him in his if he's ever at that stage in life. And much of our identity is in our relationships. Tom Kitwood, who was a psychologist in the latter half of the 20th century, is quoted by Ken Carter, who's a retired United Methodist pastor whose wife had frontotemporal dementia, says that much of our identity is in our relationships. We're more than a disease. Even as we lose our abilities to engage with one another, we are still unique human beings with personal stories and relationships, thereby worthy of respect and dignity. We carry each other's memories for them. So Carter actually calls us to take Kitwood's thoughts that we're defined by our relationships one step further, and that even as individuals are not able to engage in relationships and conversations with each other, our presence with them, our shared memories, can help maintain that identity beyond what our society views as relationships. Sam Wells, who is pastor of St. Martin in the Fields, a large Anglican church in London, talks about this and says that when he's engaged with individuals who are cognitively have severe cognitive problems, in those moments with them, he experiences presence, mystery, delight, partnership, participation, and enjoyment. So opening our eyes, opening our hearts to be with others can really help be a blessing to those we're serving and to us as well. I'm going to change gears to talk about burdens. There's a really bad fear in Western societies of being a burden to one another. And when I quote St. Paul's letter to the church at Galatia in Galatians 6:2, and it says that we are to bear one another's burdens, and in this way we fulfill the law of Christ. Well, if that law is going to be fulfilled, someone's going to have burdens for someone else to share those burdens. And we all have struggles in life, and that fear of being a burden is a new Western, and especially American concept. Just under 50% of Americans over 65, and the majority of white Americans, fear being a burden. And that fear is expressed not only by those with dementia, but it's also increasingly becoming a fear among caregivers who are in that sandwich generation who are caring for younger individuals and older family members. And in reality and practice throughout our lives, if we think about it, we're dependent on others to live our lives to the fullest. And our success and survival are intimately connected at different times in our lives to those of our parents, our spouses, our siblings, friends, colleagues, and ultimately, as we age, to our children. Warren Kinghorn is a psychiatrist and theologian who emphasizes our shared role as wayfarers who have come from God and are on our way to God. And he states that as companions on a common journey, there will be times when we will need support and times in which we will be called to give support. And those roles will change, often at unexpected or unplanned times. And as we lose our ability to be productive with our hands and our minds, God has a special place for us in God's plan, one that we should embrace. I want to touch briefly on lament. Lament is a word that we don't use much in modern society, but it's a word we really should. Lament is not just whining. It's not just complaining. It is an active process, asking, expecting, and demanding God to respond because of who God is. In times of crisis, there are lots of times when any attempts to explain the crisis and the pain that results from it are fruitless. And trying to do that in ministering to someone who is experiencing a crisis in grief has a risk of pushing that person away. Praise connects us with God. That's something we talk about a lot, but lament also connects us to God. And it puts us into God's presence in a time when we may be tempted to despair. And lamenting opens us up to God in a posture of vulnerability and fights against and gives us protection against that despair. And in any times of life, we'll all make mistakes. And lament allows us to be patient with ourselves and lean into God through that process. I want to touch briefly on physical disability. I fully acknowledge that every physical disability is very different, and one who's not experiencing that difficulty can never really speak fully to those individuals. But Joni Eareckson Tada, who suffered a spinal cord injury as a young adult and has become a really active, gifted speaker and advocate for the disabled from a faith viewpoint, wasn't really advocate for the American with Disabilities Act, has some suggestions that I hope will be helpful. She points out that there are lots of people in the Bible who had physical disabilities. Some are talked about explicitly, some more subtle. Jacob suffered a dislocated hip in the evening before the most stressful day of his life, when he felt called to start to reconnect with his brother, whom he had cheated out of a birthright a quarter century earlier. Moses had a speech disorder and initially resisted God when God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. God provided speech through his brother Aaron, but still called on Moses to be the one to lead that process. Paul talks about struggling with a thorn in his side. We don't know what that is, but it was something that caused him pain and struggle and difficulty as he went on some not only spiritually, but very physically challenging tasks late in life. So we all have roles to fulfill in God's work in the world. And sometimes the things that our society may view as least important may actually be the most important. In one of Paul's letters, he states that some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important are actually the most necessary. So Joni Tada does give lots of examples. The list is endless of ways those with physical disabilities can serve. They can write as we get new technology that let people speak to dictate into a computer. They can, any of us can write and convey anything from an email of greeting to someone to developing advocacy at the government level for those with disabilities, singing and performing music, performing visitation if not in person, visiting the homebound online through Zoom is something that's become much more possible in the last 5 years. Art is always a wonderful way that even those who don't have what they feel as artistic abilities can be a way of expression of our emotions and bring joy to others. And as we talked about earlier, there are lots of ways that individuals who may seem to be struggling with abilities can engage in communities in worship and in other community groups. And I encourage anyone who's exploring this to really dig into dialogue with others, talking with trusted friends, prayer and study to find out how we can be more vital and get a sense of purpose at any stage and with any set of abilities and challenges. We'll wrap up with a quote. It's sort of a triple header of quotes from Kenneth Carter, the pastor whose wife has dementia, Stanley Hauerwas, who is a theologian and ethicist who wrote a lot early in his career about ethics of healthcare, and John Vanier, who was a Catholic priest, who started a worldwide series of communities called LARCH, in which individuals with profound cognitive disabilities, such as Down syndrome, share a shared living home with individuals who don't experience those difficulties, and really learn from shared life together. And putting together words from each of those three individuals, in some mysterious way, those with disabilities are calling to all of us to change. When we meet people with disabilities and reveal to them through our eyes and ears and words that they are precious, they are changed, but we too are changed. And this mysterious dance of God's life and mission, those with dementia and other disabilities play an indispensable part. And I want to transition briefly to helping those of you who care for individuals with dementia can get support. Exercise is vital, even getting out for a few minutes and walking, if you're in an office, just getting up and stretching in your workspace. If you're having a really busy workday, sometimes even just looking away from your workstation, look at something else, even for just a minute or two, can make a big difference. Continue spiritual and faith practices that have been important to you. There are lots of apps that have meditative focuses that can be just playing on your phone as you're making your coffee in the morning. And that can be a way to maintain spiritual and faith practices. Don't get isolated, stay connected with friends and family. Get help with professional help or support groups if you realize that you're at the end of your rope. Even before then, if you realize you're falling and starting to slide. Respite care is a really good resource. Organizations who can provide care for your loved one and let you get a break and focus on the many other tasks that you're called to do in life. And we'll wrap up with a slide of local resources that are trusted resources. Here in Santa Monica, we have Wise and Healthy Aging. In West LA, there's a group of these really large, active senior day centers that have programs both for those with dementia and those without. Cooking classes, shared meals, educational classes, art classes, field trips, and support groups for those with dementia and experiencing aging and their caregivers. OPICA has a spirituality-based support group for individuals with dementia. Culver City Senior Center, I don't think has as many programs specifically for those with cognitive challenges, but does have lots of active programs, especially lots of exercise programs. Meals on Wheels West covers Santa Monica and Venice, but there are other Meals on Wheels in surrounding communities. Provide delivered, pre-cooked meals that just need to be warmed up, and can provide nutritious meals for those who are isolated and homebound, and also free up those of you who care for such individuals to focus on other things and enjoy the presence of your loved ones and not have to worry about preparing a meal. Alzheimer's Los Angeles is the local partner of the National Alzheimer's Association. They've got lots of support groups and educational materials. USC has a family and caregiver support center, which has lots of programs, especially in terms of education and getting logistical support for caregivers, mostly centered around downtown Los Angeles, but some links to programs elsewhere. And then I've got the telephone numbers for the county programs for individuals experiencing aging and disabilities, offering not only the types of things that we described above, but also county-run senior centers, including Felicia Mahoo and West LA. And their last disability information and access line has lots of links to things like transportation and programs that can run errands and shop for individuals who are homebound. So that's all the formal program that I had, and would love to answer any questions. John?